The old oak trees lining Elm Street stood like stoic sentinels, their branches gnarled and twisted by time, casting long, eerie shadows across the cracked asphalt. The streetlights, shrouded in perpetual gloom, cast a sickly yellow glow, barely penetrating the encroaching darkness. A chill wind whistled through the trees, carrying with it the scent of decay and the promise of an approaching storm. The houses, mostly Victorian-era behemoths, seemed to sag under the weight of their years and the secrets they held within their decaying walls. Each house stood shrouded in an almost palpable silence, broken only by the occasional creak of settling wood or the rustling of leaves stirred by the restless wind. At the end of Elm Street, in the house that sat furthest back from the road, lived a man named Mr. Plight, a man of simple routines and solitary habits. Mr. Plight was an enigma to his neighbours, a recluse who rarely ventured out during the day and seemed to vanish into thin air at night. His days were spent in quiet contemplation, lost in the pages of a book or staring blankly out of his dust-streaked windows. His nights were an even greater mystery, his movements cloaked in the darkness that seemed to emanate from the very walls of his dilapidated home. The silence of the old house was deceptive. It was a living, breathing entity, its stillness punctuated by a symphony of unsettling sounds. At night, the groan of the floorboards beneath his feet sounded like whispered warnings. The creaking of the house, as if straining under an unseen weight, echoed through the empty rooms like the moans of a dying beast. Mr. Plight tried to ignore the sounds, to dismiss them as the natural settling of an old house. But deep down, a seed of unease had been planted, growing with each passing night. He found himself listening, his senses heightened, every nerve on high alert. One night, as Mr. Plight was preparing for bed, he caught his reflection in the antique mirror that hung above his dresser. His heart skipped a beat. It wasn't his own reflection staring back at him, but the face of a stranger, pale and gaunt, with eyes that seemed to burn with an unnatural intensity. He blinked, his breath catching in his throat, but the reflection remained. The face in the mirror seemed to mock him, its lips curling into a cruel smile. Head tilting slowly to the left, then, just as suddenly as it had appeared, the reflection flickered and vanished, leaving Mr. Plight staring at his own terrified face in the glass. Section 5. The Walls Close In. The days that followed were a blur of paranoia and dread. The strange occurrences in the house escalated. Objects moved on their own, doors slammed shut without a breeze, and the whispers seemed to grow louder, more insistent. Mr. Plight felt an oppressive presence in the house, a malevolent entity that watched his every move. He tried to rationalize the events, to convince himself that there was a logical explanation, but the truth was, the house was closing in on him, suffocating him with its unseen terrors. He was trapped, a prisoner in his own home. One night, as Mr. Plight sat in his living room, his hands trembling as he clutched a cup of lukewarm tea, he noticed something strange. A single word, scrawled in what appeared to be blood, marred the surface of his once pristine coffee table. "Leave," it commanded, the crimson letters stark against the polished wood. Panic seized him. He stumbled back, knocking over his teacup, the shattering porcelain echoing through the silent house like a gunshot. This was no longer a game. Whatever was in the house with him was making its presence known, and it wanted him gone. Driven to the brink by terror, Mr. Plight made a desperate decision. He would flee. He grabbed his coat, fumbled with the lock on the front door, and burst out into the night. As he ran, he could hear the sounds of pursuit, the pounding of unseen feet, the rasping breath of something evil on his heels. He risked a glance over his shoulder and saw it. A face pressed against the window of his house, its features contorted in a grotesque mockery of a grin. The eyes, glowing with malevolent glee, followed his every move. He didn't stop running until he reached the sanctuary of the local police station. He burst through the doors, gasping for breath, his words tumbling over each other in his haste to explain the horrors he had witnessed. The officer on duty, A young man with tired eyes and a weary smile listened patiently to Mr. Plight's rambling account. He dispatched a patrol car to Elm Street to investigate, but they found nothing out of the ordinary. The house was empty. The only sign of disturbance, a broken teacup on the living room floor. Mr. Plight was taken to the local hospital, his sanity called into question. Weeks later, Mr. Plight was released from the hospital, a shadow of his former self. He moved out of the house on Elm Street, unable to bear the thought of ever returning. But the nightmares continued. The haunting images of that night forever seared into his mind. One day, while going through his belongings, he stumbled upon an old photograph of the house on Elm Street. As he looked at the photo, a chill ran down his spine. Standing in the window of the house, his face pale and gaunt, his eyes burning with an unnatural intensity, was Mr. Plight himself. Please like and subscribe. I will be forever grateful.